All right. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our State Ethics Commission meeting. It's 13th of, one second.
December.
Is it
14th. 14th today.
Oh my gosh, I missed the day. 14th of December, and I have 9:01. First, let's have a roll call. Rob, you want to go through our commission and then our staff and ask them if there's anybody with them? Or again, are they alone?
Thank you, Chair. So again, if you can affirm that you're present and that you are either alone or that there's nobody in the room with you. Starting with Commissioner Gralty.
I'm here and all alone.
Commissioner McCarthy.
I am here, I'm present in a hotel room in Seattle. And from time to time, my wife will come in and out, but she's not interested at all in any affairs of the commission.
Thank you. And present in the room, Commissioner Tobias.
Yeah, and I'm not alone.
Recognizing in the room is Commissioner Tobias, Commissioner Hong, and Chair Wesley Fong. Turning to the staff, Ms. Yoza.
Here and alone.
Mr. Louis.
I'm here at the office and I'm alone in my office.
Mr. Campbell.
Here and alone.
Ms. Chang.
I'm here and alone.
And then I am Robert Harris. I'm also appearing remotely and I am alone.
Well, I hope you get better, Rob. And I welcome all of those who went to the conference. I heard you were in a very cold city of Montreal. So I hope you appreciate Hawaii. I'm sure we all do. And Harry, I hope you're doing okay in Seattle. So
Yeah. Thank you, Wesley. I am. I've got some medical appointments we're going to be doing this month, but I'm feeling fine right now and happy to be able to connect to the meeting, at least by telephone.
yeah, well, we miss your smiling face, but that's glad to hear your voice. So take care.
Okay, you too.
Thanks. Any member of the public? I see we have KITV. Would you like to identify yourself? I guess not. Okay. I have to read this because we do have the public with us. For any members of the public who may be joining us remotely.
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. For any members of the public who may be joining us remotely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is Dwayne with KITV4 News, just observing. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Dwayne. I have to read this for you, okay? Since you're you're a part of the public. For any members of the public who may be joining us remotely, if the commission's video conference connection is lost during the meeting, we will recess the meeting and reconvene after our connection is restored. Please check the commission's website, www.ethics.hawaii.gov, for information about reconnecting to the meeting. If the meeting is continued to a later date or terminated, information about this will be posted on our website. Okay. Approval of the minutes for October 19th, 2022. I need a motion to approve the minutes. Commissioner Gralty and Hong did not participate, so I have to have it from the other two commissioners for a motion. Moved by Bev.
And second.
Second by Commissioner McCarthy. All in favor say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye, and The minutes are approved and motions carried. We also have to approve the minutes of November
Chair.
16th.
Chair, if I can interrupt just briefly, just looking at the Sunshine Law, it does require specific roll call vote, or you can ask if anybody would dissent or abstain, and then essentially do it unanimously. But the show of hands, unfortunately, isn't sufficient under the Sunshine Law.
Oh, okay. Then let's go back. Those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of October 19, 2022. Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Thank you, Rob. We'll go into the minutes of November 16, 2022. All except Commissioner Tobias. I need a motion to approve. Are there any corrections, first of all?
I joined late.
No.
Just-
I did join late.
Oh, I'm gonna ask Rob. Rob, Commissioner Tobias did join us later. Can she still vote or she cannot vote?
It joined on the November 16th meeting late. Is that the?
Yes, I remember that.
Excuse me, I think she arrived during the adjudicatory meeting.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So she would not be eligible to vote on the November 16th.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. With that explanation, I'll go down a roll. Any corrections on the November 16th minutes? I'll go down to a roll call.
Chair, I think we need
yes.
a motion. I think we need a motion. So somebody would have to move.
I
Second.
thought I had, I didn't have it. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Moved and approved. I mean,
Second.
moved by Commissioner Hong. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gralty. Yeah, any corrections? If not, go
Nope.
down to the roll call vote. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias.
Can't vote.
Oh, that's right, you can't, you weren't here, you can't vote, that's right, sorry. And Commissioner Hong. Aye. And the chair votes aye, motion is carried, and the minutes of November 16th, 2022 are approved. Executive Director's report, Rob?
Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to give the executive director's report. Just as a brief reminder, this meeting is primarily focused on legislative proposals that would go to the legislature for consideration for introduction. So this may be, relatively speaking, a shorter meeting, and we do not have an adjudicatory meeting scheduled afterwards. This is only the sunshine. So briefly, just looking at the statistics, and I'm turning to attachment number 4 on page 23. We had a slower, or again, so sorry, looking back at November, we had 1,030 people take the online self-directed training. We had 409 participate in the training webinars. We received a total of 75 requests for advice via the Attorney of the Day program, and 29 new complaints and 9 gifts or invitation for travel review. So a total of 42 new matters that came in, and a total of 35 assignments were closed for the month of November. Again, going into December, I think would anticipate to be a little bit slower, just recognizing folks may have their attention elsewhere, but look forward to picking back right up in January. That is all I think I really would like to cover for the executive director's report, unless there's any questions.
So if an employee does not take the training, ethics training, what's the recourse?
We have the power and capabilities under the chapter to do administrative, to do enforcement actions if we so choose. in passage of this, I think we did tell, both Dan Gluck and myself have sort of basically maintained that I think a lot of the focus in the beginning would be trying to get as many people through the program as much as possible. So I think, the focus will be continuing to reach out to different departments, different agencies, and trying to get them to participate versus maybe necessarily focusing on enforcement actions, at least in the beginning. We do have, close to 60,000 state employees. So, just getting them all through the training is going to take a lot of effort. And I think, we're going to see a lot of effort going into, next year when the new law kicks into effect starting in January. And they'll have a period of time in order to take the training before they'd be out of compliance.
So maybe not jumping the gun, but if an employee or employees do not take that training, what kind of recourse do we have? Is it for us to enforce the training mandate? And can we penalize them?
Yes.
What would be the max?
Currently under the chapter, you have the ability per infraction to go up to $1,000 in fines. So you could enforce a $1,000 fine. I would say that I think it's probably a lengthier discussion about whether or not you want to try to do that, particularly this early into the training session. So for example, DHERD has a training and learning portal that we've been actively working to get our self-directed web program on, which most of the executive branch uses for their training material. They have on average about a 70% participation rate in all their mandatory programs. I think the reality will be is we probably will not see 100% compliance among all 60,000 employees. I think we would like to try to shoot for as high a level as possible. And once we sort of got to the point where we've picked all the low-hanging fruit, then I think there's probably a discussion about whether what approaches we want to take next. I would propose in most situations that if we have an enforcement action of some kind, this might be an additional enforcement action. So for example, somebody's committed a violation. We'd also look to see if they've done the training. That might be an additional add-on violation. I'm not sure necessarily if we necessarily want to try to go through the process of going after thousands of people, for example, for not taking the training. That might be a bigger commitment, a bigger effort. But again, that would be the commission's call on how it wants to do that.
Questions?
Here's a thought on this. I don't know if this is practical or not. The logistics of it sound like it'd be very daunting. But if you have a number of employees in a particular division who don't, for whatever reason, take the training, what about the possibility of sending a letter to the director of that organization and bring it to their attention that he's not taking the training, and maybe have them intervene and see if they can get the training done through their own way of operating there in the division?
That's absolutely what we're doing right now, Commissioner McCarthy. We are approaching division by division and trying to work with them. So for example, Mr. Campbell has reached out to the University of Hawaii and gotten our training portal into the University of Hawaii's training portal, and gotten an email sent out that essentially encouraged all university employees to take it. We're doing similar initiatives on a number of different departments. It's just going to take time to get to all of them.
Oh yeah,
Commissioner,
I could see that.
Commissioner Hong?
Yeah, as we're looking at the statistics, would it be possible to get a denominator for the, you have the 22 total and the overall total training completion, but as we were reminding each department, would it be possible to get their total employee number as like maybe a third column, so you can kind of see which groups are most compliant or least compliant? And it's, I wouldn't ask that you get the denominator by yourself, but you probably are going to remind Department of Accounting and General Services that they're they have to do training, and at that time we might request their total employee head count.
Did you get that, Rob?
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. And we do ask the departments to give us the names of employees. I suspect that might be a work in progress for a period of time. And even when we do report it, so for example, you can see on attachment 3, the various departments and agencies and boards and commissions listed. Some of those may not be filled in, for a period of time until we're able to get the information, but we can certainly start the process of reporting that.
Any other questions from the commissioners? How about from the public? Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Robert. Let's move on. Item number 4.
Yeah, so we wanted to do a short report on the Council on Governmental Ethics Law Conference, or COGL, that some of us just recently returned from in Montreal. This conference is international in scope. The intent is to collaborate on training seminars to put people together on issues on ethics. They also cover campaign finance and other things. Sort of related, again, all sort of governmental enforcement. So it was it started on Sunday. So it was a 4-day event conference. Traveling there was Commissioner Hong, myself, Staff Attorney Campbell, and Staff Attorney Yamanuha, who is on vacation right now, not able to join us for this meeting. I've asked everybody if they could do just a brief, quick takeaway thing that they got back from this conference. Starting off on it, one thing that I would like to flag is there was a focus on sort of different ways to improve enforcement, improve program activity. And 2 of those I took away. One jurisdiction started doing automatic auditing of their data. To be clear, they were doing it with regards to campaign finance, which I think an automatic audit is probably a lot easier versus what we might do with, say, confidential financial disclosure statements will be a lot more difficult to automate. However, it's something to look at, something to keep in mind, and sort of think about how could we sort of more effectively review thousands of these statements as they're filed in a very succinct manner. In addition, another jurisdiction has taken from the financial disclosures any financial, potential conflicts of interest. So if there are, say, for example, 10 board members, they'd compile a list of all the potential disclosure, all the financial disclosures and potential conflicts, and then they would anonymously, put those into a list, so it wasn't obvious who had that conflict, and then send it to the board and say, or to the staff and the board, whoever had overseen the board, and essentially say, hey, here's some list of potential conflicts of interest. If these ever come before you, here's a course of action, what you should probably do. I'm not clear currently whether it's something we can do under a statute with our confidentiality requirements, but it is, again, something for us to take a look at if it's something we can provide, essentially trying to put in the hands of the board or commission the information about a potential conflict of interest versus us trying to retroactively catch it from an agenda or somehow sure figure out that something bad happened. So it's kind of a proactive approach, and certainly something we need to look at. Finally, one last thing, and I'll say it quickly. A lot of discussion about lobbying and just comparing our current lobbying regulations to what some other states have done. And I do think that there's probably an opportunity maybe next year to really look at lobbying more specifically. Some states have done a much more aggressive job of looking at, for example, grassroots activism. So social media, reaching out, telling people to contact a legislator on a particular bill, et cetera, and really squarely defining that as being within the lobbying, being lobbying in of itself, even if they don't have any contact with legislators directly. In addition, greater focus on sort of executive lobbying. So efforts to influence someone on a permit, somebody trying to influence them on a program, a contract, et cetera. You're trying to basically widen our current definition of lobbying, which is very narrow, to maybe include some of those different aspects of government, which obviously are pretty significant, and most people look at and say, well, of course that's lobbying. In our situation right now, our statute only defines lobbying as rulemaking. So interacting with a department, deputy director would not be lobbying unless It was involving rulemaking specifically or legislation. So, those 2 points. So again, I think there's maybe some opportunity for improvement and looking at what other states have done. A key, or Commissioner Hong, do you want to quickly say something about maybe takeaways that you had at the Kogel conference?
Yeah, I had written a small piece on it, so if anybody's interested, I'm sure Robert can get it out to people, but I found the conference to be very worthwhile. And it was challenging because both in Montreal, they were about to hold the biodiversity, UN Biodiversity Conference. And so our hotels were full of police officers. And so that was an interesting experience, and the weather was challenging and reacquainted me with I did my residency in Boston and the freeze in the Northeast. But really what it did, it gave me time to kind of reflect upon what we do at the Ethics Commission, sitting through and learning through many sessions, about information technology gifts and pay or play issues were helpful, but really reflecting got me focused on, I know almost all, 3 of you are involved in the legal profession and you're well aware of governance, but for me, just sitting on the Ethics Commission, I wondered really what's the purpose of the Ethics Commission, and then it got me to think about the purpose of government in general, providing for efforts that the community can't do on its own individually, but taxing and funding that. And our role in the Ethics Committee is clear to establish trust in governance. And that was something that got me to really think about it. It got Robert co-chaired the House Standards Commission, and it got me to reread that state constitution, all part of this conference to put things together. One interesting thing was a keynote address that the Montreal government had on a Charbonneau commission. Basically, Montreal had been involved in significant issues in corruption with contracting, including involvement of the mafia, and they stood to create reforms, and yet after 10 years, because of COVID and need to get projects through fast, many of their reforms were not completed. And it was enlightening to realize that we are going to have an uphill battle probably throughout all our tenure. But one of the most important things that I found out was really connecting with others. Kogel did a great job of having lunch rounds and events that people could start to meet each other. And I did meet people at national eminence. But one of the nice things was it allowed us to meet other people in the state. From campaign spending commission to our Honolulu City Ethics Council, and I think that was important. Even more important than that was it ability to kind of sit down and talk to the staff and kind of find out about the lives of some of our staff members and put it much more on a human basis. So I've been a cardiologist my whole life, and we have national conferences that I used to skip out on constantly because there's always something else to do. But I think that it's important to kind of have a support attendance at this, because it was when I went into the training process of training cardiologists, I would bring all our first year fellows to the American College of Cardiology conference to encourage them to start to learn about the whole process. And this was great for me to witness this. Although I have to say, walking around in 23 degrees Fahrenheit was sometimes challenging. I had to buy cheap snow boots that I got rid of in Montreal. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Also want to thank Commissioner Hongas. He did prepare a written synopsis of his impressions, which I sent to all the commissioners, so you can read that. And I'm glad it was rewarding for you to go, aside from the cold weather. Yeah. Key?
Sure. Yeah, I echo what Executive Director Harris and Commissioner Hong had said. It's valuable meeting the other attorneys and other people from other agencies. And additionally, I attended the session with Executive Director Harris about self-initiating enforcement, and I thought that was enlightening. Trying to figure out additional things we can do with the data that we already possess. But beyond what has already been said, I think two of the low-hanging fruit we could grasp would be looking at our onboarding process for commissioners. Specifically, other states have a handbook for commissioners, sort of a desk tool resource for you folks to make your jobs easier. I think we could look at our onboarding process. After discussing with Associate Director Yoza, apparently we have a handbook, but it's from 2011 and hasn't been updated. So I think we could update that and sort of give you folks a reference tool to make your lives and jobs easier. Additionally, one of the other sessions was on, sort of making commission opinions more accessible. And one of the ideas was to create a synopsis of our opinions, sort of like a head note that journalists and members of the public could read without any legalese. And I think that would be an easy way to get our opinions more accessible to the public and have people better understand what we do. So those are two of the ideas, but I echo everything that's been said.
In regards to the opinions, Key, would that be categorized like, nepotism, bribery, whatever it may be? And when we have our opinions, is that what they did? They categorize these opinions?
So it's not just categorization, it would just be like a short summary paragraph in plain language without, citations to the law explaining, here's what's happened, here's what the commission is saying. Something that, when you look at our current opinions, it's, keywords and this and that, or just one sentence. I think we could better summarize in plain language for people. Yeah.
Good. Any questions from the board? Commission rather, any commissioners have any questions? I have one question, before I ask the public if they have any questions or comments. Did they discuss what in regards to sexual harassment? Is that they did not? Because my question, remember, if we went the last session, I said, is sexual harassment an ethical violation that we have to enforce? And I still don't know what the answer is.
I didn't see any sessions on sexual harassment this time. Did you folks?
May I just interject, Wes?
Yeah.
The issue that was before us was the use of your position to gain sexual, to allow for sexual harassment to take place. It was the Speaker of the House who would grab people and give them kisses that were unwanted. So it wasn't sexual harassment. It was the use of the position to be able to get the sexual harassment. That's the distinction I want to make. There is no provision in any law that I know of that addresses sexual harassment. Nothing.
Good.
It's the fact that the Speaker of the House used his position to be able to sexually harass these people who came before him or went to visit him. That's the distinction that I want to be very clear about. So if you're going to go to these conferences looking for sexual harassment cases, you're not going to find it. It's the fact that we had the Speaker of the House using his position to his advantage. Just to clarify.
Oh, good. Thank you much, Commissioner Grotty. The reason why was the last conference we had, there was a session on sexual harassment. And I still wasn't clear whether or not there was, as Commissioner Grotty said, was it a violation if you do sexual harassment? I didn't think it was within our purview as a commission for ethics.
You are
But
correct in that regard.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, let's move on. I believe we're now into proposed legislation. Is that correct, Robert?
Agenda item number 5 is proposed budget for
Oh, I'm sorry, I
2023,
forgot the budget,
2024.
yeah. Okay,
And so with this proposed budget, it is higher than last year. It does include funding for an additional position for an analyst, in part to help with some of the review of the financial disclosures, reviews for publicly filed documents, et cetera, but also have the ability to help with investigations. And so this would be a full-time position. In addition, we proposed some funding, a total of, I believe, 4,500. Let me double check that, for training expenses. And so the idea here would be is to be able to expand some of our current training capabilities, whether it be, for example, adding video capabilities, et cetera, already pre-canned video trainings that people could opt into over our website. In addition, we put in some funding to hold an ethics conference. Again, assuming it's something this commission wants to do, so just some funding to be able to provide flights or travel from the neighbor islands here, particularly trying to get the neighbor island county ethics commissions to participate. And then in addition, we anticipate as we are moving our file server and moving our existing database system over, that there will be continued need for improvements. And so there is some money laid in there just to make sure we can hire consultants to continue updating our database system. So the total proposed budget is $1,490,115. That would be a $70,000 increase over last year's budget, or a 5% total increase.
Rob, the
Any
fact that we
questions?
have, yes, question. The
Yes,
fact that we don't have in-person meetings, are we able to save money from not having in-person meetings for the neighbor island commissioners? And is that something that we should continue? Is that now the new budget is going to have less money for travel for the neighbor island commissioners?
We currently have airfare, a total of $6,000 in the budget for out-of-state travel. So it is anticipating some commission member travel currently still in the budget. That's something we could pull back on, but quite frankly, some of that may also be used if we do hold a state conference as well.
Okay.
in follow-up on that, Robert, I noticed that its allocation is $1,000 each. Is that enough money to encourage our outside island representatives to come and join us? Is that enough that we have 12 meetings and then we can have our 2 commissioners from Kauai come join us?
I think the interstate transportation budget is right above the line above it. It's $8,500. So it exceeds the out-of-state travel budget.
No, okay, where are you looking at?
Just the
Above interstate transportation.
Yeah, so it's within the state for commissioners and staff.
So that's $8,500 more than to cover our commissioners from out of state. I mean, outside of Honolulu.
That should be more than enough to get. I mean, that is a holdover amount that has been in the budget for several years now, which was sort of pre-COVID. So I mean, to Commissioner Gralte's point, it is possible to reduce some of that. You know, recognizing that we're not likely to be holding or having commissioners fly over all the time. So that is a possibility. I'd also, you know, recognize that the out-of-state travel, and thank you, Commissioner Hong, for flagging that, is also going to be for things like the COCO conference, for example. The out-of-state travel specifically.
That's specifically for the COCO conference then, right? Anticipating 6 delegates?
It is, but I recognize that may be opportunities for travel for other reasons too. So I don't know if it's specific just to COGO, but yes.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. I was looking at the out of state. Any other questions? How about some questions or comments from the public on the budget? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the proposed budget for 2023 to 24.
Second,
Moved by Commissioner Hong, seconded by Commissioner Gralty. Any discussion? If not, roll call. Commissioner Gralty,
aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you,
now
Commissioners.
item number 6, proposed legislation. Robert?
Thank you, Chair. So just briefly, there are 2 new bills that you have not seen before, attachment 1 and number 2. Attachment 3 through 11 are bills that we have discussed previously with regards to the Commission to Improve Standards of Conduct. It is not clear to me that if the Senate is going to introduce all of those bills that are recommended from the Commission to Improve Standards of Conduct. And so what I will propose to do is that we, ask the Senate President to introduce all of those bills, and we stripped out some of the references to Commission to Improve Standards of Conduct. So simply be our package being introduced to the Senate. May mean some duplication. We may see the same bills in multiple forms, but again, just to make sure the Senate has these ideas in front of them, I want to make sure we try to propose them. So again, we will walk through in detail attachment number 1, attachment number 2, those 2 proposed bills. The other bills, I think I can summarize a bit because you have seen them before. There's really not any substantive changes except for putting it into Senate form and trying to convert it so it can be introduced on the Senate side.
Okay, Robert and I discussed this, and the suggested procedure that we like to follow is that we'll go through each attachment, because it's actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, it's a proposed Senate bill that we're doing. For example, in attachment 1, we're dealing with financial disclosures. What I'd like to do is ask Robert explain this proposed Senate bill, any questions, and then have the commission vote to support or not support presenting this to the Senate. Is that right, Robert?
Correct. So it'd be submitted to the Senate President and or the Speaker of the House for introduction.
Correct. Okay.
So the first bill.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The first-
Any objections to that procedure?
No,
Okay. Yes. Commissioner McCarthy.
no objection.
Okay. Robert?
So the first bill, which is not labeled, but it would be starting on page
33.
correct, 33, attachment number 1, is regarding financial disclosures. This is specifically intended to address the situation that we've had with regards to candidate disclosures, where the process of trying to enforce administrative fines is cumbersome and probably involves more process than perhaps necessary for essentially an administrative fine. And then in so doing so, there have been some general cleanup about the deadlines and when people need to file. This does do something fairly different than what we've done in the past, which before with regards to the to the regular financial disclosure filers, there's the potential for a $10 a day fine. This converts it so it's essentially a automatic $50 fine, and then if they don't file it within 1 month, there's going to be a $250 fine. I think it's entirely reasonable for the commission to have a discussion about whether or not that $250 should be higher or lower. So this is simply just trying to put a peg on a certain value for failure to file, and then sort of $50 automatic, and then essentially trying to create an incentive to file before the larger amount gets into place. Once the fine is imposed, there's a more streamlined process where we can essentially issue the administrative fine The filer can at that point contest and ask for a hearing. If they don't, within 20 days, the fines actually can be converted to an order and it can be enforced in sort of the normal due course. That is the intent, to be clear. And then there's just, again, some general cleanup, just trying to make the section a little bit more organized and a little bit more consistent and uniform throughout. Any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners? Would this resolve the problem that we have, you know, in regards to finances closes $50 fine, and then will the Attorney General enforce this for us?
So it does take the mandatory shall language and does say may. It does make it so we don't necessarily have to do what we currently are doing, which is we have to file a charge, we have to issue it, we have to give them an opportunity to respond, we'd have to file another notice of further violation, and we'd have to schedule a hearing in order to pursue the $50 and get to the point where we have an order. It cleans that up and makes it much more concise. Essentially, it's going to be an issuance of an administrative fine. They can request a hearing. If they don't, we can automatically convert it to an order. So it is a much cleaner, simpler process, which I think is rational. Again, with the idea of it's an administrative fine, you know, it's either you filed or you didn't file. There's not as much of a material issue with fact or law that we necessarily need to look at.
But again, prosecutions on the discretion of the Attorney General's office.
So we have discretion on whether or not we want to do administrative fine. And you know, again, I presume we'd have to be uniform in how we proceed forward, just for a fair treatment perspective. Once we issue an order, we can then submit that to the Attorney General's office for collection, right? So they can do the collection process if we haven't otherwise gotten paid.
Follow-up questions from any of the commissioners?
Yeah, with that, I have a question, Robert, with respect to that order. If I a particular individual, it seems to me if you're going to submit an order and ask the Attorney General to act on that order, that it might have more impact if there were several individuals involved, where the fines would multiply a little bit instead of a $50 fine.
I think so. There's two reasons why I sort of moved away from the $10 a day fine proposal, which is one, we've had situations in the past where people just refuse to pay, and we're actually talking, you know, thousands of dollars, which may seem out of proportion of essentially not just filing. Secondly, from an order enforcement perspective, it's hard because when do you draw the line and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and enforce, recognizing that the fees are continuing to accumulate. So the idea is just to try to give us some level of finality. They didn't file, you know, by a certain date. We're able just to say, you know, we're going to assess it, charge it, pass it to the Attorney General's office, and post something on our website, and we're done. You know, essentially to not necessarily have to continue unnecessarily. I think it is, again, squarely within this commission's prerogative. They want to make that final, you know, fine of $250 larger. I think that it's going to be debated by the legislature, but if you want to propose something bigger, we certainly can do that as well. The Attorney General's office in the past essentially said they will do collection if we ask them to. And it's not necessarily, they're not going to necessarily look at the numbers much. Again, their perspective on this could change. But you know, if we believe it's something that should be collected on, then they're going to do it for us.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Any from the public? If not, I entertain a motion that we support, the commission supports proposed Senate bill in regards to financial disclosures.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Tobias. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hall. Roll call vote. Commissioner Gralty.
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias.
Aye.
And Commissioner Hall. And chair votes aye. Next, attachment number 2, dealing with record disposition. Robert?
Thank you. And again, I do want to just be clear that we are going to ask LRB to, and we have asked LRB to review. So they may have some edits just for stylistic purposes, I don't think it would be a substantive edit that we may take into account. So I just would ask, in the past motion and going forward, if a commissioner disagrees, obviously there's going to be some stylistic changes that may occur that I'm asking you to approve the drafts in their substantive form, recognizing again, changes may occur. And if it's something substantive, then obviously it's something we're going to circle back to you for your consideration.
Okay.
So the second bill is relating to record and document disposition. We have several statutes which require documents to be disposed of by a specific set of time, a specific time period. So, for example, financial disclosure statements would have to be disposed of within 6 years, which is challenging on a couple different fronts. One, if we're extremely busy, a 6-year time period, may be something we may want to defer for a year or two before we get to the disposition, just from an efficiency perspective, from a cost perspective. From an IT perspective, it can be difficult to try to guarantee that these records are pulled. And so the intent of this bill really is just try to give us more discretion, and it's essentially converting the shall to a may, with the idea it gives us a little bit more flexibility about when we actually go about trying to dispose of some of these records. In addition, some of the records that we have are posted publicly, and we, as a policy matter, once it's posted publicly, people can download it, see it. It seems a little silly for us to then really be aggressively trying to then turn around and delete that information. So I mean, once it's on the internet, it's essentially out there, and it's probably not worth a lot of time or money or cost to try to actually then turn around and go and destroy that information in 6 years. Yeah, that's with regard to the public information that's posted publicly. So again, the intent of this really is just try to move towards more discretion and gives a little bit more flexibility to be more efficient and more cost effective on how we dispose of records. Any questions?
Questions from commissioners? Any comments? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion that we support Senate bill relating to record disposition. Moved by Commissioner Hall.
Second.
Seconded by.
Second.
Third.
Seconded by Commissioner McCarthy. There he is. All right. I'll ask if there's any more discussion. Any discussion? Okay, if not, roll call vote. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias.
Aye.
Commissioner Hong. And the chair votes aye. Motion's carried. Attachment number 3, Senate bill relating to county ethics funding. Robert?
So this is making an appropriation for county ethics. So this is again a bill that we've discussed before. It is asking the legislature to do essentially kind of a one-time expenditure or appropriation of funding to the different counties. And I think the hope is if the counties take advantage of this and sort of expand and start doing more, they're going to see the benefits of that and then want to continue doing that over time. Again, this is a bill you've discussed before. If there's any new questions, please let me know.
Questions from the commissioners or comments? I'll ask the first question. Is this more or less like a Band-Aid? I mean, you gave them one shot of funding. Will they continue on? Because the outside island ethics commissions are not as, I would say, affluent. I use the word quote unquote, as the Hawaii State or the Honolulu Ethics Commission.
So like us, they are constitutionally mandated to have these bodies. And there is a later bill that we will talk about, which is asking them to sort of more broadly review their infrastructure. I think part in the Commission to Improve Standards of Conduct, there was some pushback of saying, why should the state go out and fund something that the counties are mandated to do? I think the intent here is to kind of give them the ability to get started. Maybe if they don't have a full-time staff attorney or a full-time director, for example, they can hire one, get moving, and then use that to help create the infrastructure that's going to then hopefully be funded by the county budget thereafter. That was the rationale. model perhaps is based on sort of, if you looked at the Honolulu got a grant or funding to help establish a sustainability division. And, you know, once they got those people hired and got moving and sort of had projects in the pipeline or sort of having successes, the county was a lot more interested in actually self-funding that division thereafter. So I think, you know, the model is sort of based on that.
So this is sort of like a stimulus or a shot in the arm for the counties to get going and improve the staffing of the Ethics Commission. Is that in a nutshell?
It is, yes.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the, yes,
Will there be
Commissioner
any-
Velez. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you,
go ahead.
Chairman. Will there be any monitoring of how this is done, or they just get the money and that's it? If it's
So the-
approved?
Yes, the grant and aid program does have, you know, sort of specific requirements, and, you know, Commissioner McGralty may be able to talk to them more than we can. But yeah, I think the intent would be is that they'd actually be submitting to a proposal what they're going to be using the money for. It's given, and we're going to have an obligation to actually spend it. I don't presume this is going to be a lot of money, to be frank. You know, the intent again is just if they're going to hire a staff attorney or hire a director or something, they'd have some additional capacity to do that.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions from the commissioners? Any questions or comments from the public? No, entertain a motion to support pro Senate bill relating to county ethics funding.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner McCarthy and seconded by Commissioner Hong. Roll call. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Next, Senate bill relating to, proposed Senate bill relating to county government structure review resolution. That's a mouthful. Robert?
Again, this is a bill that you've seen before. Is essentially a resolution asking the counties to take a look at their governmental infrastructure, recognizing every county has had some level of public corruption issue bubble up over the past year or so. And so the intent here is to look at more systemically what they need to do better. The genesis of this did come from Professor Randy Roth, who had testified before the Commission on Improved Standards of Conduct of sort of doing a review or sort of audit of what's going on. However, I'd also see this as opportunity for them to identify whether or not their ethics commissions have sufficient funding and sufficient capacity to do what they need to do.
Questions from the commission? Comments? Any from the public? Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we support the proposed Senate bill relating to the county governmental structure review resolution. Moved by Commissioner Tobias. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Gralty. Any discussion? Not? Vote. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Moving on, attachment number 5, proposed Senate bill relating to the legislative allowance disclosure. Robert?
Maybe simply easier just to read the additional language. And this was proposed by Associate Director Susan Yoza. It adds in a requirement saying each house the legislature shall post on the legislature's website on a rolling basis and in a manner prescribed by the respective rules of each house, a report of the legislative allowance expenditures for each member of their respective house.
Do you have anything to add, Susan?
To add,
No. Questions by commissioners? Let me ask you a question. Who's going to enforce this? We are. And the next question is how?
I don't know actually necessarily if we'd have to enforce this, but I do think we've conferred with staff at the legislature that they have the capacity to do this. So I think once it becomes a statute, it's something that they would be able to follow and do. This would be in section chapter 24. So I don't know if it's necessarily be something we need to enforce.
Further questions by any commissioners? Any questions or comments from the public? Not entertain a motion that we support proposed Senate bill relating to the legislative allowance disclosure. Don't know, speak up.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Tobias, seconded by Commissioner Hong. Any more discussion? Not. Roll call vote. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on, attachment number 6. Proposed Senate bill relating to legislator financial disclosure. Robert?
Again, this is a bill that you've seen before. The intent of this bill is to more specifically require legislators to disclose if they have interactions with lobbyists or lobbying organizations or have financial relationships with them. I do believe this is probably I suspect going to be one of the more controversial and probably one of the more sweeping. So again, situation might be where a legislature has a consulting business where they're able to represent lobbying organizations. Our current financial disclosures would only show essentially the income coming from the consulting business, not necessarily who or where it's coming from. This would actually require disclosure of those specific lobbying organizations or lobbyists that are paying into the grand total.
Questions from the commissioners? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I would. So what's the maximum recourse that we have against someone, a legislator who doesn't comply? And will that infraction be publicized?
So we have our normal enforcement authority over this section. And yes, that could be public. It's been our tradition, particularly if we settle, that we have made those settlements public. The intent here is to require more transparency. And again, I think a legislator has to be cognizant if they don't report one of these clients or anything, and it comes out later, they're potentially going to be in a very awkward or public facing, look bad kind of situation. And I think that's hopefully what's going to motivate them to report more fully. We're also going to have a later discussion about conflicts of interest. The intent here is if they're more public about the lobbying organizations or lobbyists that they interact with, it's also going to help try to identify future conflicts of interest.
The only reason I ask was the fine that we can impose is not very much, but yet I would assume that the publicity associated with that infraction would have a little more impact. Is that a good analysis? Robert?
I think it's true, but it's also per infraction. So if there's multiple lobbyists or lobbying organizations that aren't disclosed, those all could be separate infractions. It could also be over a period of time. So if they repeatedly don't file, again, you also have the ability to have larger and larger amounts of fines as a result. So I wouldn't necessarily overlook, the value of those fines. I think they're still important, but yes, I think the public aspect of it's also going to be pretty important.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Comments? Any questions or comments from the public? Not entertain a motion to approve attachment number 6, Senate proposed bill relating to legislator financial disclosure.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Gralty. Thank you.
Yes.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hong. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Senator Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Motion's carried. Moving on to attachment number 7, lobbyist disclosure. Robert?
Yes, again, briefly, this would require lobbyists to more specifically identify that which they're lobbying on, such as my bill number, resolution number, or specific budget or program identification number. So ideas more specifically, what are they working on versus just a general subject area that they're currently required to do.
Questions? First question I have is, if they don't have to disclose, does that mean they're precluded from lobbying? And who would enforce that?
I don't think it would preclude them from lobbying. I think it would just be potentially a violation if they didn't disclose activity around a specific bill.
Any other questions? Yeah, from the commissioner, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, entertain a motion to approve the proposed Senate bill relating to lobbyist disclosure. Don't all speak up at once. Moved by Commissioner Hong, seconded by Commissioner Tobias. Any discussion? Roll call. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Next on the agenda would be attachment number 8, mandatory lobbyist training. As a Senate proposed bill. Robert?
So this essentially would require lobbyists to go through a training every 2 years. It would be a requirement for them to be able to register as a lobbyist. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
If I understand this correctly, if they don't take the training, which is part of their registering as a lobbyist to lobby, they can't lobby then. If they don't take the training.
If they were lobbying, they would be in violation, and they haven't registered, they'd be in violation of this chapter, and so we can enforce that. So they are supposed to register. They are supposed to register within 5 days after lobbying, within 5 days. And as a requirement, they'd actually have to take this training, which we would have online. So the idea is that it's something they could take relatively quickly as a part of their registration process. If they don't either do the lobby training or they don't register, one or the other, that would be an enforcement action that we could take against them.
But would that preclude them from lobbying? I'm sorry, somebody had a question. Commissioner McCall.
I had a question. Yeah,
go ahead.
I wonder what the sanctions, any other sanctions proposed for lobbyists who refuse to take the training, because I could foresee a lot of lobbyists saying, this is just not, I don't have time for this, I'm not going to do it. And you're going to have a lot of issues, I think, with respect to how we're going to address that. If it's going to be any fine or sanction or something that would, besides telling them that you can't lobby. And if you tell them you can't lobby, I could foresee a lot of legal issues popping up out of that. So I think it's a troublesome thing. I think it's a great idea to have the lobbyists take a lobbying training course, but again, the enforcement of this is going to be difficult.
Yeah, so I don't think we could prevent someone from lobbying. We're not going to go in and try to stop someone entering a room or office, for example. They'd simply be in violations chapter. They hadn't registered, they hadn't taken the training.
Yeah.
So that would be the violation we'd be enforcing. So, we frequently will reach out, like we'll see someone testify repeatedly on a bill, and it'll be, relatively apparent, that they might be a lobbyist. And so we will, currently right now reach out to them and say, just so you're aware, this is the lobbyist requirements. Here's what you need to do if you are a lobbyist. And so we actually try to encourage people to register. And again, the intent here isn't to try to discourage people from registering. And that was definitely a consideration in how to draft this. I do want to recognize Staff Attorney Chang for helping come up with this proposal. I think there is a pragmatic reality of how do we ensure people are going through the training. And the easiest way to do it is to make it as a requirement, as you register. If we let people register and then try to do enforcement later, did you take the training? It just gets very awkward and unwieldy for us. I think the intent was, every 2 years they're going to register, and the idea is as a condition, much like the Bar Association right now in Hawaii, in order for you to register for the next year, you have to certify you're taking your CLE. I mean, the intent is to be somewhat similar to that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great idea. Certainly we support it in principle. I just see that there's difficulties down the line, but we'll have to deal with that if they come up. So I would support it.
Okay, my only concern is that, it's like, for us lawyers, we have to take mandatory CLE classes. We don't get, we can
Can't
get
practice.
certified. So if this is the same thing and it's a requirement that you have to have this training before you can register, my assumption is that if you don't take the training, you can't register. Or is that too simplified?
So that's correct. You're absolutely right. Right now, the training would be about a 30-minute module that'd be available for free on the website. The idea is that you'd have to click on that, go through the 30-minute training, and then be able to then go through the registration process. I can certainly see, for example, a one-person nonprofit organization where that staff member is very busy, very engaged, sort of seeing this as an additional obstacle. We've tried to reach out, or I've had conversations with HANO, which is the Hawaiʻi Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, as an effort to try to explain what this proposal is and try to work with them on trying to do the trainings simpler, easier, try to make it as easy as possible. I think particularly the small nonprofits.
Commissioner Galti.
Might this not be a situation where a fine might be helpful in getting people to register, first of all, and that it be a daily fine so that it really has some bite to it? I mean, we can't take away people's opportunity to make a living or be heard. That's Constitution. We lose on every count, but we can certainly fine them if they're not following the ethics rules. So my thought would be, let's not go constitutional. Let's go practical. You're going to be fined, and it's going to be a daily fine until you register. Anyway, that's my thought.
So Commissioner Grotte, are you in favor or not in favor of supporting this? Out of curiosity.
As it stands, I would be opposed to it, or I would vote in favor with reservations, but I don't think it's quite going to solve the problem. We want to stay away from constitutional issues.
Yeah, I want to be really clear, because I think there's a mistake and if I didn't address it more correctly, there is no prohibition on lobbying under this proposal whatsoever. So all would happen is that as it happens today, if somebody doesn't register with us as actively lobbying, they're violating Chapter 97, and we can fine them. Right? That's what happens today. The only difference with this bill passing is there's a slightly, there's an additional add-on requirement in order to register. You have to take our training. So it'd be much like, again, just it's an additional requirement you have to do. We had some pang about that, to be clear. We don't want to make registration difficult. We want people to register. The only thing the lobbyist section really does is provide transparency. Here is someone who's lobbying, here's how much they're being paid. That's really all it does. So we want people to register. However, we also recognize that having them be aware of some of the gift regulations, some of the different restrictions is all beneficial, and we want to take the opportunity to train them and make sure they're aware of that prior to registering. And also recognizing this is a fast-paced area. Every 2 years, we may have some new regulations or restrictions. We want to have the opportunity to update them. We currently have about 400 registered lobbyists. We have really high participation in our lobby training programs already. So, my expectation is most lobbyists will not see this as much of a burden. My biggest worry will be, again, on the sort of small nonprofits where, this probably is going to be an additional requirement. And we'll work with them to try to make sure it's as easy as possible. But again, we will not stop them from lobbying. We can't. We don't have the authority to do that.
Commissioner McCarthy, you had a question or comment?
No, I think I made my comment already, Wesley. I support it in principle. I have reservations about it, but I will support it, and hopefully it will do what it's supposed to do.
If I may also add, just to kind of piggyback off of Robert's comments, the intent was to also educate people at the front end, right? Because some people
Yeah.
may not even need to register. They may fall under exceptions. And it's like for nonprofits, they may not be aware of what are the requirements. So having that education on the front end would kind of just
Mhm.
prime people to say, okay, this is what the law requires. And it's intended to be easy where as they're registering, if they do actually come onto the system, they just got to check the box and certify, yes, I took the training. And then we can run
Mhm.
reports on an administrative level. It makes it easier on the staff to verify that because we can see
Yeah.
who took the training and we can also see
Yeah.
on the filing who's registering and we can verify, yes, they did in fact take the training. So that's really kind of
Yeah.
like the mechanics of the intent behind
Uh-huh.
this. And we do
Yeah.
have a large turnout for the webinars in January. Typically, it's a very high turnout, and I think we've been offering 2 sessions to accommodate people. The online module would just make it even easier because then it would always be on demand. And so for mainland lobbyists who are not familiar with our laws, it makes it super easy for them to access it. If they're not able to, for some reason, a scheduling conflict, they can't attend the webinars.
Oh.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Just
Commissioner
one comment. I am not sure where this falls, but what about organizational lobbying? You know, like when you get from people who are on the main line, like for instance, AARP, and they say, send this in because this bill is coming or that idea is being fostered through the system. Where does that fall in all of this, or does it?
So that probably goes to sort of what is lobbying or not lobbying. So for example, here the AARP would have a registered lobbyist in the state of Hawaii, and they would be reporting activity for staff underneath them or staff that have done work on some of that social media stuff, for example, and that'll be reported as their part of their lobbyist reports. The primary function of the lobbyist registration, again, is just transparency to make people aware where money is coming in, who's spending it, and what. I do think we could probably look more specifically at some of the social media stuff and make sure we're really capturing it as a part of lobbying activity. But right now, like using your example, ARP does have registered lobbyists in the state of Hawaii.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I entertain a motion that we support proposed Senate bill relating to mandatory lobbyist training.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right,
I'll
moved by Commissioner Tobias and seconded by Commissioner McCarthy. Was
Yeah.
it Commissioner Gralty?
It was Commissioner Gralty,
I
if
would-
I'm not
I would-
mistaken.
Okay.
I would
Commissioner
second it.
McCarthy.
I'll defer.
Commissioner Gralty. Thank you very much. Is there any more discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye with slight reservations in regards to enforcement. Motion's carried. Thank you. Attachment number 9, nepotism. Robert?
So again, this is another bill that we've talked about. And so I don't really intend to get too deep into it unless anybody has specific questions. This is really focused on, and again, I want to recognize Mr. Campbell for helping draft this. The primary focus here is on the hiring and sort of on a forward-looking basis, hiring and supervising of relatives again, and then there's an actual defined term for that, defining it. I'm happy to answer any questions or defer, pass the question over to Mr. Campbell if somebody has any questions about this bill.
E, do you have anything to add on that?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you though.
Okay. Just one comment. I looked at the definition of relationship. I thought it was pretty good coverage. So anyway, any questions or comments by the commissioners? How about the public? Not, I entertain a motion to commission support proposed Senate bill dealing with nepotism. Moved by Commissioner Hong,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner McCarthy. Any discussion? Roll call. Senator, he is senator. I still remember him as senator.
People still call me
As opposed to judge. But anyway, Commissioner Grohl, what title would you like?
Actually, Jeff Spray. Aye. I vote aye.
Thank you. Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Next, attachment number 10, Senate rules regarding conflicts of interest. Robert?
Yes, so this is a proposed resolution revising the Senate rules to more specifically identify what is a conflict of interest. It takes a much more broad and expansive interpretation of that. It additionally makes default more of the baseline of what should happen and does create a pathway by which the Senate could waive the conflict of interest, but tries to do it in a much more public fashion, requiring an actual vote by the body in particular. The rationale for allowing them to vote to essentially allow a conflict of interest is just recognizing there may be some situations where too many members are conflicted, that they just need to have a vote, et cetera. But again, that had to happen in a very public fashion.
So,
Is that
yes.
different than, I remember a couple of meetings ago, maybe the last one, Commissioner Gralty said when these things came up before the Senate, if somebody's proposing a conflict of interest, they would go back and discuss with themselves and say, oh, we decided there is no conflict of interest. Is this going to make it different because it has to be done in a public vote?
Yeah, so there was a skit done by, I believe, Saturday Night Live, where it sort of poked fun of one legislator who I will not name, who was working for essentially a plastic bag industry company, was voting on a plastic bag bill, and they said that there was no conflict. And so
Yeah.
I just use that as sort of a reference that, yeah, it was pretty well accepted
Yeah.
that anything was found to not be a conflict. So this is much more explicit, and it takes a much broader interpretation of conflict. There was an example by Marjorie Bronster, who's the former Attorney General, when she's coming up for confirmation, and she, and this is her words, not mine, essentially stated that she had done some criminal prosecution against one of the senators. The senator, again, voted on her confirmation, saying that there was no conflict to do so. And so this takes a broader interpretation of conflict, which would, essentially take a reasonable standard as well of what is a conflict. So again, it would be broader, more likely that somebody be found to be in conflict, and it would require them to not only not vote, but not participate in any of the discussions, behind the scenes or on more. Again, just a much more comprehensive proposal. And then if there was a vote to allow the conflict of interest, it would have to be very public about what the matters are involved, and would require a vote, I believe 2/3 of the body. Let me double check that. One of the fears that one of the senators had brought up is they were afraid that any very controversial bill, a lot of people would then say they have conflicts of interest as a means to get away from having to vote on that controversial bill. So again, I think the idea of creating a exception was in part to sort of recognize there may be that concern.
Thank you. Commissioner Gralty, being a former senator, do you have any comments on this proposed bill?
It's a step forward from where we were, so I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good move. We will never eliminate conflicts of interest, and people close their eyes to it, but this is as good as we can do.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
And in all fairness, I do want to recognize a staff attorney, Yamanuha, worked quite a bit on this proposal too. So I want to make sure she gets credit even though she's not here.
Oh yeah, well, thank her for proposing this.
Sure.
Any questions or comments from the public? If not, I entertain a motion that we support proposed Senate bill relating to Senate rules regarding conflicts of interest.
So move.
Moved by Commissioner
Senator
Broughton?
Grunty, yes.
Is there a second? Is that
Second.
second by Commissioner Tobias? Oh, it's like pulling teeth, guys. Okay, any more discussion? Okay, roll call. Commissioner McGralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias.
Aye.
Commissioner Hahn. And the chair votes aye, motion's carried. Last on the agenda, attachment number 11, gifts from lobbyists.
Thank
Robert.
you. This bill just succinctly makes the gift regulations reciprocal both on lobbyists and on state employees or legislators. So it incorporates the restrictions that are in place by now by reference to the statute and administrative rules. So if those change, this would automatically change with it. The intent is simply to say that if a state employee can accept a gift, a lobbyist also can't offer it. So just try to make them reciprocal.
Any questions? Does that refer to me? I'm a legislator can't receive anything from me, or?
So again, if it's an unlawful gift, so for example, we've had public sessions where like a lobbyist went around giving $90 or so bottles of wine to each legislator. The idea is not only could the legislature not accept it, that lobbyist couldn't have given it. So the idea is try to make sure that the restrictions are uniform in that situation.
Okay. Questions, comments from commissioners? Any questions or
Just
comments
one,
from the? Yes.
Yeah, we discussed the gifts a lot before, the value of gifts and what type of gifts and so forth. And is this, do I understand that we are not defining gift in this? It's simply we're saying no gifts at all without respect to valuation?
This doesn't change our existing law around gifts, what is allowed, what's not allowed. So for example, we have exceptions for flower lay, for example. That exception doesn't change. So, lobbyists could give a flower lay to a legislator, fine, right? That's not changed. The idea is if it's an unlawful gift currently under our rules or under our law, not only could a state employee not take it, the lobbyist couldn't give it. So the idea is, again, let's just hypothetically say a lobbyist offers a $250 gift certificate to a lobster dinner. Not only could we proceed after a state employee for taking that as a violation of the ethics code, we could also go after the lobbyist for having given that as well.
Yeah.
And again, I think that the hope would be is that the lobbyists are probably going to be, they tend to be, just because their professional reputations are important, they're going to be, pretty aware of this. They're not going to want to have a situation where they're sanctioned or at risk of sanctioning. So we're just hoping it's going to make compliance better overall. Not necessarily that we want to go enforce after a bunch of lobbyists. It's just we're hoping that this will make the situation easier and cleaner. We have talked about trying to update the administrative rules on gifts and trying to make, I think, perhaps more bright line rules to try to make it easier for people to understand, recognizing we've gotten a lot of feedback. I do think we'd have to wait on the rules just because we have so many legislative proposals going forward. It'd sort of be silly for us to also try to update the rules until we've seen which one of these things pass or doesn't pass. But I think in talking to legislators, I'll be pretty clear that we'll be looking at, potentially trying to redefine some of the gift regulations as well.
Yeah.
Robert, actually, doesn't section 84-11 kind of cover what we're talking about in regards to gifts? Would that be adequate?
Yes. Well, it's that as well as our rules, right? So it references both.
Okay, that was for Commissioner McGralty's information. Okay, any other questions or any comments from the commissioners? How about from the public? I'll entertain a motion. To approve. Moved by ladies first, Commissioner Tobias, and seconded by Commissioner Gralty, right? All right.
Right.
All right. Any more discussion? Okay. Roll call. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias?
Aye.
Commissioner Hong?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, motion's carried. I believe that's the end of proposed legislation. Robert?
It is. Thank you for your patience on going through all those different bills. Obviously, we have a lot. And again, I really appreciate your support in these bills as they move forward.
And Robert, may I say on behalf of the commission, and at least on behalf of myself, I want to thank the staff for doing a great job in proposing these, this proposed legislation. Hopefully it will help. Go ahead.
Fully agree. I think this was a comprehensive team effort. I do really want to recognize the staff for all the hard work on it, on top of, you know, the normal day-to-day stuff that they already do. So thank you. I think we're ready to move to agenda item number 7, which is the update of Commission to improve standards of conduct. So the final report by the Commission to improve standards of conduct was submitted on December 1st. It is available on the Capitol website on the House page. If you click on that, it is about 400 pages. However, bulk of that is essentially the proposed bills. And we've seen, you know, a fair amount of public support for this concept. We've seen several of the representatives in particular say they're, you know, going to move forward with some of those ideas and try to move them through expeditiously. The Commission to Improve Standards of Conduct, you know, essentially does not exist anymore after December 1st. It's that final report submitted. We are now done. But I think there's going to be a continued effort to try to support the various bills and efforts that were proposed. And happy to talk about that if anybody has questions.
No, but I think we thank you for representing us as the State Ethics Commission as being the vice chair and doing a great job in this Blue Ribbon Commission. Hopefully it'll do some good. Any questions or comments?
No questions, but I fully endorse what Wesley just said with respect to Robert's efforts behind this. It really is a job well done.
I agree.
May I just out of curiosity ask where our 2 legislators are presently housed? The senator and the representative, any idea where they are? Not that I'm going to visit them, I'm just curious.
I don't know.
I guess we'll have to check with Bureau of Prisons. Thank you.
You want to bring that up now? How about well, let's start. Any questions or comments in regards to the Blue Ribbon Commission in regards to improving the standards of conduct first? Any? Okay. In regards to Commissioner Galti's question, Robert, that was another question. I think it was proposed by Commissioner McCarthy that we send some letter of concern in regards to the 2 legislators who are, I guess, convicted of bribery. Is that correct?
Bribery.
Corruption, yeah.
So we did
Right,
submit an
you-
we did submit an op-ed. The intent was to file it around the same time as, and apologies for being very public about this, but it was filed intended to be around the same time as sentencing for Representative Ty Colon. His sentencing got pushed off, and so the op-ed is maybe a bit less direct specifically on those 2. However, if the intent is to file something with a judge at sentencing, again, we're a adjudicatory body. You know, I think it would be surrendering our ability to do anything further in that matter. And again, if you want to do a motion on that, we can certainly submit a letter as well as a part of the sentencing. But I do want to caution you, it probably means you can't do anything further in this case,
Yeah.
right? Because you'd
When
be
is the
biased.
sentencing? When's the sentencing now, Robert? Do you know?
I would have to look it up, but I believe it is in January.
That's okay. January. Well, I think the op-ed piece was very effective. I just thought, you know, if it compromises us in any way to take any possible enforcement action later, which I think is unlikely given the substantial sentence that this guy's liable to receive, wouldn't want to do that. But I just thought it would be a statement from the State Ethics Commission to the judge how we view this matter, and without any great specificity, just to let them know that this highlight to the judge, highlight to the public that we're well aware that there seems to be a proliferation of corruption, of bribery in the state now, and that we are aware of it, and we are taking action to make sure that it does not go unnoticed, and that the public is aware of it, and that we're aware of it. And it was something along those lines. But if I would refer to your guidance on this, Robert, if you think that would somehow compromise or interfere with whatever action we might or may not want to take later, I'm fine with that.
Robert,
I think, yeah, I think the takeaway we had before in prior discussions that we wanted to do an op-ed to do something public facing, which was the intent of the op-ed that we ran the Civil Beat. As we also had a Q&A with the Civil Beat, and then had an editorial. We've also had editorials at Star Advertiser.
Yeah.
And so there's been a fair amount of media coverage, and I think a lot of it's starting to turn more forward facing, to be clear, maybe a little less focused on the specifics of these two individuals, but a little bit more of what do we need to do to try to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I do think that's a healthy place to be. However, again, this is the commission's decision. I do think just even having discussion is going to be difficult to do enforcement without sort of an accusation of bias, or due process concerns, right? It's like a judge talking about a case before it comes before them, right? So,
right. But as a practical matter, this guy gets 20 years, like the other guy got. I wouldn't imagine we're going to do too much enforcement on that. It seems like it's been done, but I just think that our position as the State Ethics Commission, that I think it should be, more publicized in the sense that the public is aware of it. They will know who we are, and that if they have any leads or any beliefs about corruption by public officials, they can certainly report it to us. So it's along those lines. But maybe the op-ed piece said that. I didn't read it, so I don't know.
Any questions? Yes. Mr.
One of
Tobias.
the things that I just wanted to clarify for Commissioner McCarthy is that there were 3 articles in the Garden Island, and we're kind of the last to pick up on many things, so that it is widespread, and that there are people who are paying attention and have spoken to that. Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing. I did read a couple of those articles, but sometime back, but it is the Garden Island, and that's great for Kauai. I just thought maybe a little broader circulation would be even more effective, but I guess that's been done with the op-ed. So,
Okay,
anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah. Commissioner Grauty, does that answer your concern?
Yes.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the public in regards to this subject matter? Okay, if not, let's move on. Item number 8. Akana. Robert, how many years has it been since we did this? It's 19. No, I'm sorry, 2020. When did this? 2018? Was it 2018 that we did this?
Yes,
case?
2018. I remember it well.
You were the chair. Okay, Robert, Akana.
no updates. Nothing new.
For the general public, what's the status? Where is it now?
Appeals.
So it is currently it's currently on appeal. And we're just waiting for the Intermediate Court of Appeals to make a decision on it.
That's been a long time.
Okay. Well, I hope before it's the end of our tenure.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
any questions or comments about the Kana case from the public?
You know, when I
If
passed
not-
away, I can have on my epitaph. He was the chair of the Ethics Commission when the Akana case was first heard.
You did a great job.
That may be some time from now. Not
All of that
planning to pass away. So.
much paid off. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn? Before we adjourn, I'd like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and or Happy Holidays to all the commissioners and the staff. And we'll hopefully see you next year in January. Anybody else have any last minute comments? No, if not, I'll
No.
entertain them. Yes. No, yes, no. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Tobias. Is there a second?
Second, with a wish for peace on earth.
Seconded by Commissioner Gralty. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. I get a roll call. Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong, I'm sorry, Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong.
Aye.
And before I say aye, I wish Commissioner McCarthy a successful endeavor in Seattle. Hope to see you back, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much, Wesley. I hope to be back too for the March, for the January meeting in Kauai. So,
Stay warm.
Great. Like to see you over here in person one of these days.
I'd love to making it over there. Maybe I can. We'll figure it out.
We have the
Just-
budget
just-
for it.
Just leave the feral chickens and parrots in the Kauai.
I will.
And the
That's one
chair, thank you. The chair votes aye. Again, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Okay. Happy
Aloha.
holidays all.